Yeah, you know, the way that the article ended was it said the really hard problem because the easy problem was hard, and then you get to the hard problem. Given that the easy problem is actually hard, the really hard problem of how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective conscious experience probably will remain unsolved for a very long time to come.
Mm.
Perhaps it will never be solved. Perhaps it's not true. You know, like, are we willing to consider that? Perhaps it'll never be solved because consciousness is not generated within
Mm.
the brain. And I've always thought that, like, let's say they even kind of discovered the soft problem or the easy problem of consciousness. Let's say they were able to kind of draw parallels between brain activity and consciousness and show, look, it's happening in this part of the brain right here and right now. But couldn't that be very similar to like discovering like music in a radio? You know, it's like
Right.
one could say that this box generates music. Well, actually, there was a musician who was like the source of that music, right?
Right.
And
That's a great analogy
they
too.
recorded it in a studio, and it was sent as a signal to that box. And you're discovering it within the box and assuming that its origin is within the box,
Mm.
right? They got to think outside
You're
the
never gonna
box.
figure it out. You got to think outside the box. Yeah.
ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, the daily spiritual podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha Das. It's Friday, June 20th, 2025. This is episode 1630. Welcome to the show. Good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful Friday. We got a big live crew here with Bunky and Henry and
Vinod.
Bhakti Vinod and Shamali and PV.
All right.
We're filled to the rim here.
Make sure they got their, you know, we're getting a little lag here, so make sure they're
Wi-Fi off.
Turn your Wi-Fi off, guys.
Wi-Fi off, yeah.
Wi-Fi. Sucking up my bandwidth. We had a little cookout yesterday at the farm.
Oh, that's always nice.
Yeah. Everyone loves a good veggie dog.
Oh, that's the way you went, huh?
Yeah, that's what we did on the cookout. We made veggie dogs. Made veggie dogs, and I made some of my famous polenta.
I didn't know you were famous for polenta.
I'm famous for
Yes.
polenta, and I also make a good Tuscan bean soup. It'll blow your mind.
Okay. Look at you. It's
Tuscan
like a
bean
real
soup, a veggie dog, some good
traditional stuff.
ruby red kraut. What else do we have? A spinach and arugula salad.
Look at you guys.
Yeah, and it was a perfect weather, and the peacocks were honking. It was like really picture perfect that last night.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Oh,
Great.
great. Another day of adventure today now.
Yeah. What's up with you?
There's a initiation ceremony going on today in the city. Throughout
Yeah.
You're dropping in on that probably.
Exciting.
Yeah.
We're
And
having
Amrita Kishori, our listener,
Yeah.
Kikoji, is getting second initiation, so that's nice for her.
Oh.
She's always had for years now, she's been doing seva at the Bhakti Center for the deities in the temple, but without second initiation, you can only kind of assist.
Mm.
And so now she'll have the opportunity to dig in herself and serve personally.
And we have a lot of our Wisdom of the Sages people getting initiated by Raghunath Swami at the farm Wednesday. We have Happy Jack. We have Brooke. We have Jiva's husband, Lex, flying in from Germany. And Pope Pius.
Yeah.
It's going to be an extravaganza.
All right. Great.
All right. So let's get on with the show, Mr. K.
Yeah, well, that brings us to Mara at this point.
Mara? announcements for us, please?
Yeah, we have a special interview tomorrow at 8 a.m. And we'll do our Q&A day on Sunday. Is that right?
Sounds
Yeah,
good to
Mary,
me.
we got a really cool thing that our good friend Kaylee Lalita, who is known from being the guitar player for 108 and also an old friend of ours. She's doing her thesis, her PhD on
Pilgrimage.
what pilgrimage means for Westerners. And so we're going to talk about it, and she's going to talk about me the first time I went on pilgrimage. But then we're going to unmute some people and invite some of our Wisdom of the Sages people on the podcast to talk about why they went on pilgrimage. What was it to them? You know, where were they at in their life when they went? Because some people go after cultivating bhakti for many, many years and they go on pilgrimage. Some people go, they're like, well, I'm just sort of new to yoga and I just wanted to go to India, and they have some experience. So we're going to talk about what pilgrimage means, but it's going to be really, I think it's going to be really interesting hearing different people's experience.
All right. Anything else, Mara?
That's all.
All right. How about the nugget then?
All right. We have a nugget from freelance science writer Moheb Kostandi.
George Costanza? Who?
No.
Published in
Moheb Kostandi.
Kostandi.
Okay.
And it's published in Big Think, July 2023.
Okay.
Headline is Neuroscientist loses a 25-year bet on consciousness to a philosopher.
Mhm.
Will we ever unravel the mystery of consciousness? Two academics made a 25-year bet on it, and the scientists lost. 25 years ago, two academics made a bet about consciousness. Christof Koch, a neuroscientist, wagered David Chalmers, a philosopher, that the brain mechanisms underlying consciousness would be known by 2023. Chalmers thought otherwise.
Yeah, now Chalmers, it mentions that he's a philosopher, but really consciousness is his maybe I can Google this right now, but like he's got a position at NYU that has everything to do with understanding consciousness and the brain and all this kind of stuff. So it's really his field.
When they made the bet, many scientists were busy using newly developed neuroimaging technology to search for what they called the neural correlates of consciousness, defined by Koch in a recent interview with the Swedish science magazine Forskning and Framsteg.
Yes.
That's such a Swedish science magazine.
Forskning
and Framsteg.
As the footprints of consciousness in the organ of consciousness, which is the brain.
Okay, so let's just start by. It seems like they're going in with the presumption that it will be found there.
Yeah, you'll be able to see it with neuroimaging. Well, just like you can see, they can see, like someone had a seizure. You'll be able to see that in the brain.
Yes, and so they're making. How did it phrase it? The two academics made a bet about consciousness. They wagered that the brain mechanisms underlying consciousness would be known. How do you know that there are brain mechanisms that underlie consciousness?
It's like
Unless
a phenomenon.
you don't have any evidence for it, right? So why make that assumption? But they're both going into with that assumption.
You know, it's funny when you make like a bet for 25 years from now, that always seems so far away. And
Yeah.
here we are. It's 2023.
Yeah.
2023 is past. We're still just as we still don't have those flying cars we've been talking about. They're getting
got
close.
Yeah.
Still haven't figured out consciousness.
Koch and Chalmers agreed to set up a series of studies by rival consciousness researchers who would collaborate on experiments designed to test each other's ideas about how the brain generates consciousness. The preliminary results of some of these experiments were presented at the 26th annual meeting of the Association for the Scientific Study of Consciousness, held recently at New York University, where Chalmers now directs the Center for Mind, Brain, and Consciousness.
There you go.
The results presented at the ASSC meeting showed that both theories are still incomplete. In other words, neuroscientists do not understand consciousness. So during the main event, Koch appeared on stage to present Chalmers with a case of fine wine.
Okay.
Can't figure it out. Let's get drunk.
but that was the bet.
Yeah.
But and they also several things are in that article or in similar articles. It was a big deal when this happened in the science world, right? They made a bet in they made a bet in 98, right? In 1998. One said that, yeah, it'll all be mapped out, it'll all be clearly defined how consciousness is generated in the brain.
Mm.
And the other person says, I don't, the other person believes that. Chalmers, that's his faith. And we could call it that faith, that's his faith because he doesn't have evidence for it. But he just believes that it's too subtle and too difficult to figure out, that it wouldn't be figured out within 25 years. So the 25 years passed.
Mm.
They set these two rival consciousness research teams, and actually many others. There's something like 6 teams like working intensely on the problem from different angles, and none of them were able to do it. And really, they kind of established, when they were on stage, they said something like, they defined what would be satisfying evidence, and within that was like, there'd be clear demonstration of this or that. And I think what Chalmers said was, what's clear is that everything's unclear. and Coach had to agree with that, or Koch had to agree with that. And then he presented him with the wine. And then they made another bet. They made the same bet for the next 25 years, when they would both be like in their 90s or something like that. That they would discover this. But it was in this conversation. I don't know if it's where he coined the term, but it's where the term became popularized. In the original bet, the bet was made on stage and publicly, I think. That Coach used this term, the hard problem with consciousness, because there's a soft problem and the hard problem. The soft, or the easy or the soft problem, is just, can we find an exact correlation between brain activity and consciousness? And then the hard question is, can we show how the brain actually generates consciousness? You understand? And the first problem, the easy problem, they said, is actually quite hard. Even that part they can't figure out. And my, I would say to that, when you go in, no matter how learned these people are, or how high their IQs are, how studied they are, it doesn't mean that they necessarily think in a way that's entirely unbiased or entirely fair or entirely logical. Because again, they're going into this with an assumption. Once you do that, why not go into it with the idea, like, we have no idea where consciousness comes from. Let's see what we can find by looking at the brain. But they went into it with the idea, let's go into the brain and find out how it generates consciousness. It's a very different approach in one sense. And that assumption or presumption can color the way that you process the evidence that you find. But even with that potential bias, they still were not able to discover anything. And they even found that what they thought would be easy was far more difficult or complicated than they had assumed.
High IQ of an ant. That's what we're dealing with.
The
We're
high
like,
IQ of
no
an
matter, meaning no matter how smart we are, maybe someone's got the highest IQ ever, the smartest guy in the world, he's still like an ant compared to these big questions of life.
Yeah.
That meaning we may not have the skills to even ever understand it, in the same way the ant on my computer can't understand the screen,
Yeah.
no matter how intelligent the computer screen, and no matter how intelligent the ant is. He's the most intelligent of all the ants, but he can't understand, like, he's in a house right now.
Right. Yeah, the way that the article ended was, it said the really hard problem, because the easy problem was hard, and then you get to the hard problem. Given that the easy problem is actually hard, the really hard problem of how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective conscious experience probably will remain unsolved for a very long time to come. Perhaps it will never be solved. Perhaps it's not true. Are we willing to consider that? Perhaps it'll never be solved because consciousness is not generated within the brain. And I've always thought that, like, let's say they even kind of discovered the soft problem or the easy problem of consciousness. Let's say they were able to kind of draw parallels between brain activity and consciousness and show, look, it's happening in this part of the brain right here, right now. But couldn't that be very similar to like discovering like music in a radio? You know, it's like
Right.
one could say that this box generates music. Well, actually, there was a musician who was like the source of that music, right?
Right.
And
That's a great analogy
they
too.
recorded it in a studio, and it was sent as a signal to that box. And you're discovering it within the box and assuming that its origin is within the box,
Mm.
right? They got to think outside the
Never going to
box.
figure it out. You got to think outside the box. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So, there were yogis who were scientists of consciousness. They're experimenting with consciousness, going back, is according to texts like Bhagavatam, as far back as forever, practically. And you could go up into the mountains of the Himalaya mountains and into quiet little hermitages way up there, and those yogis would have told you 5,000 years ago that consciousness is a separate type of energy. It's not generated within the brain. It can't be generated. It's eternal. It's something that you can't deconstruct. It's something, it's made of an entirely different type of energy that can't be picked up with the material senses or even the extensions of those senses in the form of microscopes or this kind of technology, electric technology that they're using. It's an entirely different type of energy. And you can come back 10,000 years from now and you're going to find yogis up in those mountains saying the same thing. That this is the presentation of what the yogis claim is coming from the manual of the universe, right? From the Veda, from a source of knowledge that can be downloaded, that gives us this kind of stuff that is otherwise achintya, is otherwise inconceivable to us, right? You can infer so much about consciousness, and what they infer lines up very nicely, and all fits together, and you can practice those experiments in consciousness. You can practice yoga and meditation and so on, and feel the results. But you're not going to be able to ever, according to them, ever show how this brain generates it, because the brain doesn't generate it. It's eternal.
I predict, and I bet you, my friend, that in 25
you want to make
years,
a bet, do you?
I'm going to make it. A case of Martinelli sparkling apple cider.
Okay, yes.
I bet you that in 25 years from now, they're going to figure out how all these spiritual paths are connected. It's going to be like just common knowledge. In the same way you see a vegan restaurant in every corner, a yoga class, a yoga school on every corner.
Yeah.
Consciousness, it's going to be just so understood, and sound and consciousness and mantras and chanting. It's going to be so big. We're going to be like, wow, remember in the 2025 when like it was like really still weird and underground?
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about that now.
Yeah.
1968, no one knew it. It's like weird, foreign, underground, avant-garde, weirdo stuff.
So your prediction is that let's tighten this up a little bit.
Meditation, chanting of mantras, consciousness, God is one. Religions are all meant to be together. The only thing that's going to exist, a bunch of extreme fundamentalists, you know what I mean, who are in other religions.
So,
but
so
for the
you're
most part,
predicting
people will accept Vedic thought. Even very learned people and very respected people are going to accept Vedic thought. It's gonna flip around where a few scientists will study this and think it's interesting. I think the masses will say,
okay. Let me try to define this. So you're saying that within 25 years there'll be a unified spiritual or religious, a common, widespread, unified spiritual understanding.
yeah,
And that it'll involve the basic fundamentals of Vedanta, that the body and the soul are different, that God manifests in many different ways, those kind of things.
yeah, and it could even be like through AI. Even AI could facilitate. We were talking about the
Make this
dangers
happen.
of AI. AI could facilitate it. People could say, well, what is God, or what is consciousness, and what are these questions? And it could draw a lot of people together thinking like,
It's true.
this makes actually sense. And I could see like a lot of even people, spiritual practitioners from other paths saying this Vedic teachings have some value. And I could see a lot of Vedic practices saying, you know what, these other teachings have some value. And there could be a very, very organic type of, what do they call that? When all the different religious groups get together.
A conference,
Interfaith, ecumenical,
yeah,
consensus.
a consensus.
Mm.
And you will be speaking at that.
Well, I'll be one of the
You'll
leaders.
be at the UN.
I'll probably be the Pope of it.
Okay.
And that will not be self-proclaimed. People will come together and vote me in.
People will remember this day where you made the prediction.
And they'll say, you know what? He prophesized this. He's one of our prophets.
And you'll be flooded with Martinellis. It'll be a huge day for Martinellis.
They might call me Martinelli. Pope Martinelli.
Okay. But in one sense, I think that is what we're working for, right? And that's what any and all of us can work for. It's just like get this again, like I've been sharing with you here on this podcast for some time, or I do occasionally. We can go to YouTube and we can hear from thought leaders, whether they're scientists with PhDs or whether they're just like really articulate thinkers. But we can hear from these thought leaders their ideas, and sometimes you're just like, hold it. You haven't even considered the Vedic explanation of this, which is going to change everything of what you're talking about. Like there's an answer, maybe you won't even fully accept the answer, but the fact that you're not engaging with this answer means that this knowledge has not penetrated enough, And I agree with you that these ideas that we didn't really grow up with, like when we were quirky, the idea of reincarnation was just kind of like a quirky thing. Yeah.
Fringe, quirky.
Yeah, where I think it's far more accepted now, and what to speak of 25 years from now, it could be like widely accepted. It could be widely accepted within Christian faith. It's a possibility,
I want to interview Chaitanya Charan about his new book on reincarnation.
The reincarnation book. Yeah.
Let's get that going.
Okay, you're trying to steal that interview? I see what you just did right there.
You
I was planning on interviewing him.
You were planning on interview. I think I'll do it better because I don't think you even believe in reincarnation.
Well, I mean, you are the Pope of universal spirituality.
Yes, I mean, the monk's going to be like a Bible. It's going to be sort of like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I just think I'd be the better one to interview him on reincarnation because you barely believe in it.
Excuse me?
You know what I'm talking about.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You believe in it, but you don't believe in it like I believe in it.
Okay.
Like I believe in it. I believe it's happening all the time around us. People are coming into this world.
I have been fairly committed to that idea for
people are coming into
40 years.
This world, speaking about things, writing on message boards, telling their story. I'm here with them in the pits, in the trenches.
I admit that you may be in the pits. But
in the trenches,
I grant you that.
Trenches, I meant to say.
Okay. All right, Okay, Pope Martinelli. Let us read what Bhagavatam has to say.
Continuing on. Narayanam namaskrityanam chaivanaratamam devim saraswatim yasam tatujayam madirayat. Before we start in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Narayan. Unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshu badreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati utamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart will become eradicated, and loving service to the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, will be established as an irrevocable fact. Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Midatam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my teachers are opening my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my obeisances at their lotus feet. Reading for the Srimad Bhagavatam. Canto 10, Chapter 3, text 15 to 17.
Who's speaking?
The demigods. That's
No.
my guess. No.
Vasudev is speaking.
Vasudev is speaking.
The
Okay.
father of Krishna, kind of I don't know if we can call him like a blood relative, or but in one sense, the original, not the foster father, but the original father,
I
right?
can't call him the blood father. I don't think that would make
He-
sense.
I'm sorry?
I can't call him like the blood father. You're my blood.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um, but in other words, he's not the foster father as we commonly think of Nanda, who raised Krishna
Right.
as a father.
And who is actually the father of Krishna? Nobody, in one sense.
And that's also true. But now he's seeing his son born. He's in the prison cell with his wife Devaki, and Krishna is born, but he appears first with 4 arms. He appears as Vishnu, and he has this epiphany that we were discussing yesterday, where he begins to understand that my son. I was just worried about the evil tyrant Kamsa coming to kill my son. But my son is Vishnu. He is the source of the consciousness that pervades all of material existence. He's within the heart of every living being, including Kamsa. He's like
Right.
he's the thread that ties the entire universe together, and realizing that and experiencing that realization, all of his fear has dissipated, and he's offering his prayers to Krishna, or you could say Vishnu.
Okay. Here we go. 15 to 17. The Mahatattva, the total material energy, is undivided, but because of the material modes of nature, it appears to separate into earth, water, fire, air, and ether.
Okay, why don't we just quickly touch on that, right?
All right.
So the Mahatattva, the total material energy, is undivided. In other words, like you have a batter, right, where all the ingredients are just all blended into one. And then, you bake it, and it begins to manifest in different ways. It rises, and you have your crust, and you have your middle of the bread, and it's something from an amalgamation due to the influence of the modes of material nature, which we'll probably discuss more today. It begins to manifest in what appears to be separate forms and separate shapes and separate manifestations, but it's really all one big energy.
Because of the living energy, these separated energies.
That means the Jiva Bhuta, that means the souls, right? Because of the souls.
These separated energies combine to make the cosmic manifestation visible. But in fact, before the creation of the cosmos, the total energy is already present.
Okay.
Therefore, the total material energy never actually enters the creation. Similarly, although you are perceived by our senses because of your presence, you cannot be perceived by the senses nor experienced by the mind or words. With our senses, we can perceive some things, but not everything. For example, we can use our eyes to see, but not to taste. Consequently, you are beyond perception by the senses. Although in touch with the modes of material nature, you are unaffected by them. You are the prime factor in everything, the all-pervading, the undivided supersoul. For you, therefore, there is no external or internal. You never entered the womb of Devaki. Rather, you existed there already.
Okay. That was a long way. In one sense, it was a long way to get to that point, right? But he's saying, I know you're not like any other child that begins, is conceived, and develops in a womb and so on, and apparently is born, at that moment. You didn't enter the womb of Devaki. Rather, you existed there already. You exist everywhere. There's nowhere where you don't exist. And whether my senses can perceive that or not is another question. But he has this understanding that that Krishna is eternal, and that he's speaking to his omnipresence, you could say.
One who considers his visible body, which is a product of the 3 modes of nature, to be independent of the soul is unaware of the basis of existence. And therefore, he's a rascal.
A rascal.
A rascal.
A little rascal?
A little rascal. Those who are learned have rejected this conclusion because one can understand through full discussion that with no basis in soul, the visible body and the senses would be insubstantial. Nonetheless, although his conclusion has been rejected, a foolish person considers it a reality.
Interesting.
Mm.
Right. So one who considers his visible body, which is a product of the three modes of material nature, is a product of matter, to be independent of the soul. In other words, that this functions without any spark of spirit, right? That's what our scientists were betting on, right? They said our awareness, our consciousness, that's something that's generated within this blob of matter called the brain, right? It's all in there somewhere. We're looking for it. We're looking inside there. We can't quite find it, but we're convinced that life itself, is generated right here. And it's saying that that's Prabhupada is calling them rascals. Those who are learned have rejected this conclusion because one can understand through full discussion that with no basis in soul, the visible body and the senses would be insubstantial. It's not that our consciousness is dependent on matter. It's that the matter that forms our body is dependent on consciousness. Right? It's the consciousness precedes the form of the body. Maybe we can read the commentary here.
Of 18, right?
Yeah.
Without the basic principle of soul, the body cannot be produced. So-called scientists have tried in many ways to produce a living body in their chemical laboratories, but no one has been able to do it unless the spirit soul is present. A body cannot be prepared for material elements.
Okay, So Prabhupada wrote this in either 76 or 77. And 20 years later, those two scientists made that bet.
They'll figure it out. We'll make a Frankenstein.
And 25 more years later, they realized that they still couldn't even come close to even understanding the correlations between the brain and consciousness. What to speak of demonstrate that consciousness is generated by the brain. What to speak of create consciousness in a laboratory.
Since scientists are now enamored of theories about the chemical composition of the body, we have challenged many scientists to make even a small egg. The chemicals in eggs can be found very easily. There's a white substance, a yellow substance covered by a shell. And modern scientists should very easily be able to duplicate all this. I mean, they did a very, very good job with those chocolate eggs, Cadbury eggs. Very, very close, but they still couldn't crack it.
Nothing comes out of it.
Yeah.
But in one sense, this might sound like a simplistic argument, but actually it's quite a profound argument, right?
Right.
If you take an egg, you can analyze all the ingredients that are in it. You can gather those ingredients from another source and produce another one.
Yeah, and then make it look just like an egg.
Yeah, and then why not just put that in an incubator, right? Create the right temperature or whatever it is that you have to, and let's see life come out of it.
Because it's missing some magic.
Apparently, there's some ingredient that they're unaware of within that egg.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But even if they were to prepare such an egg and put it in an incubator, this man-made chemical egg would not produce a chicken.
There you go.
The soul must be added because there is no question of chemical combination for life. See, this is immediately where the rascals would be like, the soul. Now you're getting all magical.
Why not accept it? In your theory, or your prediction, should I say prophecy?
Prophecy. Call it that. Call it what it is.
Okay, let's just call it what is your prophecy. Your prophecy, I think that it will have to do with the scientific community becoming more accepting of this idea. And I believe we're seeing the beginning of that already, because the fact is when you've got these old scientists who have based their entire career on it, right? They were brought up philosophically with this idea that began, some centuries ago in Europe, There's no God behind all of this.
There's no God behind it. Now let's figure it out without God in the picture.
Exactly.
Without all the magical stuff you talk about.
Right.
But think about, there are also these very, very evolved science. Now also there's a union between East and West thought. There's a lot of transportation. A lot of people are believing and grew up with Vedic thought are moving to America and back and forth. So it's like boundaries and lands. The communication is wide open now between different countries
You
and
got to come up with a manifesto, Raghunath.
yeah.
You're spelling it all out.
I'm spelling it all out.
Yeah.
And so now you have imagine growing up in a Vedic family, for multiple generations, and all of a sudden you just like, yeah, well, what you're writing everything off with these biblical understanding of spirituality, but here another spiritual path's understanding of spirituality, and maybe you can't write this one off as quick.
Yes, and my point is that I think that now that you have younger scientists coming up,
We're a little bit more open-minded,
and older ones dying off, that the younger ones are coming up with not necessarily the same kind of pressures, you could say. If I published books, built a reputation, got my tenure, and got potentially millions of dollars of funding based on a theory that was wrong, then my entire life was a failure. It's like I'm a huge laughing stock. It's going to be very difficult for me to admit that my whole theory was entirely wrong. But when you have young people coming up, they're starting to look at things in a different way. I think people kind of presume that like take Darwin's theory that he was just studying and he discovered something. Well, no, there was a philosophy, an idea about life that preceded it for centuries. And scientists were working hard to try to explain, how it is that we came about in a way that excluded the idea of a designer. So it's kind of like it's kind of an explanation that was being searched for rather than one that appeared. And I think so much of the scientific research, they're going into it in that way. As these young scientists come up, and they can be, another kind of dynamic that's always there in academics is you establish yourself by proving your predecessors wrong or insufficient in some way. And so it may be that in the coming decades, younger scientists rise up and they tear down the theories that have been prominent up to this point, and that
paradigm
may give
shifts.
Yeah,
it happens all the time.
Yeah, there may be strong scientists that come up and they say, we need to consider, the following, or that having heard, maybe becoming more familiar with knowledge like the Vedic knowledge, that they actually dig into it and find out, truths that are in there that are very hard to explain how they understood this so long ago. They'll lend weight to their presentation of those things that can't be perceived with the senses, right? We can't perceive the soul with the senses, but look how much information that they're giving us, that is really difficult to explain. My thought, and I still, I put this out there, I think it would be a huge thing if scientific research were done on Vedic astrology. And by scientific, I mean that if you gather together, I think you would really like this, Raghunath.
Yeah.
If you gather together, let's say 10 or 20 Vedic astrologers.
Yeah.
And you provided them all each with pairs of charts.
Yeah.
And charts that were like very different from one another. And you said one of these two will have 6 children and lots of money and be famous. And the other will be a loner their entire life and nobody will ever know about them. Which one? And you do that with all of these, and then you test the accuracy. And if you could find that, let's say 95% of the time they got it right.
I don't think that's the test.
Well, hold on.
Because they could just say, "Oh, your math is just going to come out like that." You have to get like 20 different
hold it.
people.
What you just said, you have to be more clear. What do you mean?
You got to get 20 different people and have 20 different astrologers do each chart.
Raghunath, that's exactly what I just said. I said you
No,
get 20
it's not.
astrologers, right?
No, you guys said 20 astrologers with the same two going over like two different charts.
No, what? No, no, no. I'm saying they're comparing sets of pairs of charts, not just that it's one pair.
I think
You're
it's
going
just not even their chart. You got to get the people, and you got to people who are like successful and or famous, and people who are murderous or loners or something like that,
Raghunath, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know if you're.
and have them know nothing about those people.
That's exactly
And
what I'm
then
talking about.
them
They're just
tell-
getting the charts,
Okay.
right? They're getting two charts. They don't know anything about the people except these charts, and you get 20 scientists to look at one pair and determine amongst these two which is the person with 6 children and lots of money and fame.
Or just have them say, tell me something about these two people, and get the 20 astrologers to tell you something and see how much these things line
But
up
that-
how accurate it is.
Well-
I have 5 children. I have 6.
But-
This
but-
guy said,
But that is now you're bringing subjectivity into it. There's a hard question. One of these people had 6 children, one of them didn't. Tell me which one, right? There's no ambiguity in that. Because you can't say, well, I say he had 3 children. I don't know if that's a lot or a little. No, you want a hard question, right? One of these people had 6 children, had huge fame and popularity, and you go, so let's say you ask that of 20 Vedic astrologers, and let's say they're right 90% of the time. And let's say you do that with 20 charts. Now mathematically, what should happen if the entire thing is false is that they get it right 50% of the time.
this is why the prophecy will come true, because all these experiments will happen
Okay.
in time. You know what I mean? This is why it's all going to
Part of the
unravel.
prophecy. Right.
And people are going to take all these things more seriously. And they're
But
going
just
to
if I could,
then you're gonna-
to complete my point.
Okay. Then they're going to do the whole idea of love infused food and health and stuff and how
Oh,
that's
nice,
different.
Nice.
Everything.
But my point
What,
is,
what are the effects of the mind when you watch Vedic dancing as opposed to, break dancing, perhaps? It's going to, in music or sound. They already do these things, Kaustubha, but it's going to become popular.
okay,
Okay.
I'll leave it there because I don't think I'm ever going to be able to get the full thing out. So why don't we keep reading the commentary?
We understand the point here. We understand. They're going to.
I'm not sure.
They're going to
It
figure
would-
this
It would
out.
be nice if I could complete it
They're gonna-
someday. Come
they're
back.
Gonna, they're going to figure this out.
All right.
We've accepted that. All right. Want to keep reading the purport? We over this chicken egg stuff.
As you like.
All right, let's go to the next one. Text 19.
19.
Oh, my lord, learned Vedic scholars conclude that the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the entire cosmic manifestation are performed by you, who are free from endeavor, unaffected by the gunas, and changeless in your spiritual situation.
Mm-hmm.
There are no contradictions in you, who are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Para Brahman. Because the 3 modes of material nature, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, are under your control, everything takes place automatically.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Yeah, he's presenting a scientific theory, right? He's saying that the creation, the maintenance, and the annihilation of the entire cosmic manifestation are performed by you, that there's a person behind it, that there's a designer behind it. And he's saying that who are free from endeavor, you do it without even trying. It's just like effortless for you. And you're unaffected by the modes of material nature, changeless in your spiritual situation. So outside, this is another big question in science and in science and where it intersects with religious thought, because there's been a theory of the Big Bang. And the latest, kind of scientific discovery is showing that the world had a beginning, right? That there's a start to it, and it's kind of here we're getting this particular presentation, right? In the Vedic understanding, the universe has a start, and then it has an end, and then it starts again, and then it has another end, and then it starts again.
Right.
And it's saying that in all of those cycles, are, here's calling them free from endeavor, but they're effortless, but they're intentional, right? It's designed and created with an intention, and it's carried out by a source outside of it, outside of time, outside of the influence of the gunas that makes it happen. Those gunas are like, it's like the ingredients that are making it all. In other words, if this universe was a video screen, you would say it's made up of the pixels of 3 different varieties.
Sure.
And from those 3 different varieties, red, blue, and green, you get unlimited shades and colors and shapes that take their form on the screen. And so what the Vedic scientists are saying, or the Vedic yogis are saying, right, is that they're saying that this entire universe is built up of 3 different types of pixels, right? Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And they blend in so many different ways to create all the forms and all the experiences and circumstances that we experience in this world. And then they go further than that, and they say in each one of those pixels, everything is made out of a combination of those pixels. And each one of those pixels has a particular influence. And the pixel that is predominant in any form, that form will radiate the influence of that pixel. And that's either sattvic, which is illuminating, or rajasic, which is kind of like stimulating desire, or tamasic, which is destructive. Right? And they had this whole theory. Now, that in one sense, he's just spouting this out, right? He's throwing out his scientific theory. But we can experiment with it. We can say, do I find these 3 influences in the world? Can I identify places that are
experiment them in the privacy of your own home right now?
Yeah, and
you
see
can be
how it affects you.
You can be in the lab.
Yeah, that you can practice, and then you can, through those experiments, you can begin to infer, hey, there's something to this, right? There's something to this. Okay.
Continuing on.
20.
My Lord, your form, so these are still prayers, but they almost sound like a scientific evaluation. My Lord, your form is transcendental to the 3 gunas, the 3 material modes. Yet for the maintenance of the 3 worlds, right, you assume the white color of Vishnu in goodness for creation, which is surrounded by the quality of, you assume the white color of Vishnu in goodness for goodness. For creation, which is surrounded by the quality of passion, you appear reddish. And at the end, when there is need for annihilation, which is surrounded by ignorance, you appear blackish. We have almost like the primary colors here are creating nuanced many other colors. Oh, my Lord, proprietorship.
So just to, in the commentary, Prabhupada's going to get into the idea that, basically the guna avatars are being described here, right? That Krishna manifests in a form to help carry out the cycles of creation, maintenance, and destruction in the forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva.
Oh, my Lord, proprietor of all creation, you have now appeared in my house, desiring to protect this world. I am sure that you will kill all the armies that are moving all over the world under the leadership of politicians who are dressed like protectors or kshatriyas or rulers, but are factually demonic. Thus, they must be killed by you for the protection of the innocent public.
Okay. So this is, it's interesting. How did he know this? Is this knowledge that was being shared amongst the different ruling families? Is this information that has suddenly just arisen in his awareness by the influence of Krishna?
I mean, Vasudev's not an ordinary person, so yeah, he might have come from his birth. He understood this, or he just got some awareness because basically he thinks he's the father. But in reality, he's just playing the role of the father. And so maybe just some wisdom surfaced for the first time.
we're reading the story from the beginning of we're in the third chapter now. But we heard in the first chapter how Mother Earth feeling overburdened by the presence of demoniac men who had taken on the forms of rulers in different dynasties. She goes to Brahma and says, I can't handle this anymore. They pray to Vishnu. Vishnu says, I will take birth along with the Devas and will rid the earth of this burden. So we know that. Now, apparently Vasudeva knows that too.
Mhm.
And I don't know if he knows that because there was talk of this going on. And he's like, oh, it's you. I've been hearing about this and here you are. Or if it's something that he is kind of picking up, as kind of like something that he's realizing just by the grace of Krishna within his own awareness, being in his presence.
Okay.
That's one of the two.
All right, continuing on here. Text 22. Oh, my Lord, Lord of the demigods, after hearing the prophecy that you would take birth in our home and kill him, this uncivilized Kamsa killed so many of your elder brothers. As soon as he hears from his lieutenants that you have appeared, he will immediately come with weapons to kill you.
Oh, this is interesting on the level of rasa, right? Because up until this point, he's been speaking about Krishna as being, well, you're God. You're behind everything. His fear is gone. But it seems like his rasa is shifting a bit here. And he's beginning to think of him as his son again. We need to get you out of here. We need to protect you. So it seems that, I wonder if that's mentioned in the commentary at all, but it seems like there's a shift in his feelings towards Krishna. At first he was seeing him as God, and now he's beginning to think of him as a father who has to care for his son. At the end, maybe it says something here. As Kamsa was not expected to kill the beautiful child of Devaki and Vasudeva, the uncivilized society, although unhappy about the advancement of Krishna consciousness, although Krishna cannot be killed, Vasudeva, the father of Krishna, was trembling because in affection, he thought that Kamsa would immediately come and kill his son. Okay, so it feels like Yogamaya has kind of covered his understanding that his son is the unkillable, all-powerful Vishnu, and now within his mind and heart, he's beginning to see him as my boy.
Yeah.
I think we're out of time, Raghu.
Oh, wow. That flew by. Hello, Miss Mara. You have any takeaways for today?
I do.
Any prophecies of your own
I
None of
want
my
to hear some of
own.
Mara's prophecies.
from the book of Mara,
That could be part of
of your manifesto?
of my manifesto. Yeah, the book of Mara.
Don't let your assumptions color your experiments and evidence.
Okay.
Mara 1.
We have the high IQ of an ant.
Yeah, basically.
High IQ, but tiny perspective.
Mm.
Yeah, okay.
The musician.
We'll let that in the book of Mara.
Oh, thank you.
We'll allow that
But
in.
you'll take credit for it.
Well, the book of Mara will.
The musician is the source of the music, not the radio.
Yeah.
Good one. That was a good one.
Yeah, it is. Think out.
An outsider came in and said the book. Yeah. We're going to give you credit, but we're just going to call you the
The
outsider.
outsider.
The
Yeah.
outsider came in with some
With
wisdom.
the radio analogy. Or what are they called? The parable. The parable of the
Parable.
radio and the musicians.
Parabolist.
Think outside the box.
Think outside the box. It's not all in that little box. Think outside the
Mhm.
brain.
Mm. Krishna is beyond our perception of the senses and exists everywhere eternally.
Okay.
Mhm.
Mara.
Consciousness precedes the matter of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The soul is the missing magic.
Oh,
I like that. I like
and
that
the
one.
egg.
Mara.
You
The
can't.
soul is the missing. I want that T-shirt. The soul is the missing magic. Mara.
You can't figure it out without letting God in the picture.
Doesn't make sense.
The writings of Mara.
They all come from you guys.
But I know you're the compiler, like
Yeah, like the book of Luke.
the book of
Right?
Luke.
He was there seeing Jesus. It was all coming from Jesus, but he was sharing it.
Writing it down. You're sharing
We're
it.
like the Jesus, and
We're I guess that would make me Jesus, and you would be something like the leper, Kaustubha.
okay.
And
The leper has a lot to teach too.
Thank you.
Raghu,
Just don't kiss me or anything.
Let me heal you. Come hug me.
and Raghu is the Pope Martinelli of the universal spirituality.
Pope Martinelli.
Hey, Papa Martinelli.
I find the Pope in the pizza.
Oh, everybody, thank you for joining us live. Check us out on this special pilgrimage episode tomorrow. People share their realizations and sort of like what they weren't expecting, what they were expecting for pilgrimage with Kayla Lolita, one of our listeners and friends who's working on her thesis for how pilgrimage affects these Westerners and what they're looking for going to holy places. And we're going to unmute and interview a few people on the show that've been to India and what they got out of it. Sort of interested. And we're going to have all different people, sort of believers, people who are like, yeah, opted into this is my path. And then people who are just sort of like, I just went along with this thing. I was into yoga. I went and this is what happened. So thanks very much, everybody. It is a beautiful day for a beautiful day. And thanks for everybody joining us in the morning. You too can join us in the morning by emailing Miss Mara, wisdomofthesages.com, and get the secret codes to join our little morning Sangha. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Haribo.